Welcome to Spirited Dialogue hosted by Transformity. I'm Gautam Palapa.
I'm Asanka.
And we're the founders of Transformity, a thought leadership forum that focuses on transforming humanity with empathy and technology. This is episode 2 of the data strategy series, Data Driven, leveraging data for a superior digital experience with our guest, Sunil Sharma. Sunil, thanks for joining us again. We're excited to have you on.
Thank you, Gautam.
All right. So in episode 1, we talked about what a good data strategy is and why it's valuable to an organization, especially in this hyper-dynamic digital native experience economy that we live in. I want to thank you all for your comments, your suggestions of additional topics. And based upon the feedback that we've gotten, I figured that a good starting point for today's episode is on building a good data strategy and selling it to the organization and the board of directors. So let's dive right in. We all know that the pandemic was a compelling event for companies in various industry verticals to take a long, hard look at their business models and adopt to changing customer behavior and demands, requiring a lot of investment into data. This has radically transformed various businesses, and many of them realize that the overall experience is more important than just features and services. The time to market has dropped drastically, and many companies have implemented processes to gather data and use them in decision-making approaches. But is that considered a data strategy? From an executive standpoint, it might feel that they're already having a data strategy in place, but is that really true? And these are some things that we're going to explore. So Sunil, in the previous episode, you had mentioned that we need to have an ambidextrous data strategy. That is, it needs to be both offensive and defensive. So I'd like to start with you, and this is a two-part question. The first one is, how would you go about convincing leaders that they need a good data strategy? And then a follow-up to that is, how would you sell the value of a good data strategy to these executives?
Thanks, Gautam and Asanka again for inviting me. And Gautam, that's a great question. And the question like, do we really need a data strategy? I think in today's scenario, and you mentioned pre-COVID and post-COVID businesses, and you can see how our lives have even changed, how we are working, our ways of working have changed, our ways of interacting have changed. Now workforce is more hybrid rather than going to the office. So same way, if you look at how the business, which means the business context, the challenges, and things are changing around us. And if you go back few years back, we did not had so much of compute power available at economical cost and the options. But now if you look at today, we have so much of compute power available at a very economical cost, and time to or time to market has gone drastically, which means there are options available to do this pulse of data which organizations have, which means that we had limited options to draw intelligence from the data. Now we have that capability available. However, are the organizations really investing that much in thinking about it? Answer may be depending on the organization and the context. But if I give you the example of, let's say, blue chip companies, 99% of the organizations are heavily investing in the data. And I would say out of that, around 24% of the companies have changed into data-driven organizations, which means in today's scenario, the changing business context, the demand from the customers for a richer, better experience and faster services is actually forcing us not to have an option. So not having a comprehensive data strategy is not an option, is the need.
Thank you, Sunil. And that is something that I've observed as well with working with a lot of these companies, is that we need to have not just a cohesive strategy, but a consistent one as well. And so I wanna ask you, Asanka, what's your point of view on this? Because you also interact with a lot of companies, and help them ingest their data and work upon it?
Yeah, so I think Sunil made some really good points as well. I would like to continue from there. So basically, I think one way that we can highlight the importance of the strategy by walking the talk. Like one thing is you can have different data strategies, but end of the day, you need to have a way for people to discover these data that you are enabling. So treating data as a product, I think one of the key initiatives, because product is a mindset change as well, right? It is evolving, it's iterative. So same way, data is changing, and you might be bringing new system of record layers, and you might be capturing into new business models, and acquisitions are common in the market. So the data strategy also have to be evolved. As a result, the outcome or the data product has to evolve as well. So having a clear visibility, as well as having a good synergy in between the business, I mean the penthouse and the engine room, I would say, people who build this stuff as well as people who consume this stuff, linking that and have a better alignment will help to define the strategy properly, as well as implement the strategy and execute it and get the support from various stakeholders in the organization.
That's great. And I'm I'm really happy that you brought in the penthouse and the engine room concept, because that actually is a perfect segue into my next question, which is much more around around architecting a good data strategy. So, Sunil, how would you go about building a good data strategy, and what are some successful patterns that you have seen?
Yeah, thanks, Gautam, and thanks, Asanka, and touching upon some of those key points. It's also important the organizations looking at the cultural shift, which we talk about is the data mindset and the data literacy. So those two things are very, very important. And I just want to make one point that you might have seen so many organizations as part of your case studies. At some point, those organizations were blue chip companies, but they missed the J curve. So again, linking back to your first question, why it is critical, organizations don't want to miss the J curve. They don't want to be a case study in the future at some institution. So now continuing with Asanka's insights there are a couple of key points for a very, I would say, effective data strategy. First thing is that data strategy has to be specific, practical, comprehensive, and it should be ever evolving. It's not just once you create something and then you're done. It is evolving as your business scenarios, business context, your business models are changing. So now looking at, there are three, I would say, key steps in creating a very, I would say, effective data strategy. First is the contextualization, means looking at what kind of business environment we are operating, asking some key business questions, means what are the challenges we are facing? What is our business strategy? What we want to do? Are we looking at improving our decision making, or we are looking at creating a new product or service? And then within that, we are also looking at two perspectives. What is the organization perspective? And we are looking at the data perspective in that. And then doing a kind of a SWOT analysis, what kind of data we have as a strength and weakness, what data we need. Second point will be the ideation. Ideation means a data strategy have to have a proper roadmap, means ideas which are solving the business problems. And this is where in my experience, I have adopted an OKR approach, means clearly define use cases or goals with a clear measurement criteria. And third, I will say is a prescription, means linking your ideas to an execution plan. Execution plan is very, very critical here. And then finally, how are we going to measure the outcomes of whatever the use cases we have? How are we going to measure the outcome, and how we create a flywheel effect a good operating model. So those are the steps to create a very, I would say, effective, impactful data strategy.
That's awesome. That's such an important point. It is so essential to be always aligned to the business outcomes and the why. And that needs to be our North Star. And we need to have an outcomes roadmap that help us achieve the outcomes that we have identified as our target state. And in addition to that, we need to measure what matters to see if we are progressing down towards our outcomes, or if we need to pivot and or persevere to look at it. And Asanka, I know you and I have had several conversations about this. I just want you to get your perspective on what Sunil said and any additional thoughts that you have.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Sunil mentioned, and I'll continue from there. And I have a bit of a opinionated view on this, as usual. And it is basically based on some of the strategies that I have done, as well as based on the conversations you and me had for a long time. So the one principle that I follow, as well as would like to these organizations to follow is based on the domain-driven design. Because how you do domain-driven design is basically follow the Conway's law. So I learned Conway's law from you, Gautam, long time back when we did a summit together. So it's a nice way of identifying the structure of the organization and the communication flow, and then map the products and the systems. So same way we can do that and identify these domains and then start thinking about how the domain objects, entities, and the required data that you can categorize and then implement inside these domains. That way, we are achieving two things. We are simplifying this massive data structure into small chunks, as well as we are giving ownership to different groups who knows this data in and out, and then allow them to manage these data within these domains as well. So that is leading us to the next steps, like how the future data architecture looks like, how the future data strategy looks like with all these microservices and cloud native architecture. So I'm not going in detail about it, but to give some highlights, like the patterns like the data measures and then data lakes, those kind of things can easily bring into the picture when you have an approach towards the domain-driven design.
Yeah, so I think we have established that we need to build a good data strategy. And we also need to sell executives on the value, right? We've talked about it for a considerable amount of time. However, what I want to bring to both of you is that my observation is that one of the sad occurrences that I keep seeing, and I'm sure both of you will agree, is that a majority of these data sciences or AI or data strategies that are implemented within all these organizations have not usually been pretty successful. The success rate is pretty low. It feels like these organizations somehow succumb to the hype and they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And so, Asanka, I'd like to start with you on this question because you and I have had hours and hours of conversations and great arguments around this. What do you think is the reason for this? And then Sunil, I'd like your thoughts on what Asanka's perspective is.
Yeah, I think a bunch of reasons. And the first thing I see inside these organizations, these data architects, scientists, they work as a silo. So they are not connected to the business. They are not connected to the application architecture and development groups. So that is a major issue. So they do something, develop something, and then expose it, but it's not consumed by other groups because it is not communicated well as not heard what the organization requires. So that is a major issue that I see. And the second one is not following this outside-in approach. So I roughly touched based on the PGPR, the personalized, geosensitive, predictive, and real-time experience the end users are looking at. So how we can have the outside-in approach when we are designing data strategy as well as implementing it is going to be key. Then from day one, you are delivering value to the business and then to your other stakeholders as well. To kind of overcome this thing, like democratization of this data strategy, as well as get everybody involved, and then have that business alignment, as well as a more outcome or value-driven approach will help organizations to have a better alignment with these data strategy, as well as the outcomes that they are planning to get from that.
Awesome. Sunil?
Yeah, great insights, Asenka. And my observations are also similar to yours. And a couple of observations which I have seen in the organizations where the programs are not that successful is one of them is that if your data strategy is not supporting your business strategy, which means your business strategy has to be infused with your data strategy, means at the end of the day, it has to deliver value. So this is where it can deliver value when it is aligned with the business strategy. If it's not, we're going to have a challenge. Second is that clearly defined use cases means you have to have a clearly defined use cases means are you looking at to increase revenue or decision making, and how you're going to measure it and how you're going to link it with the business strategy. So that's very, very important, clearly defined use cases and measurement criteria. Third is that at times we see that companies have a lot of data and then we are trying to find patterns, rather taking the approach of having a business problem or identifying a business problem and then see if we have the data to resolve it or to create value. And the last but not the least is that we are always missing a feedback loop or an operating model, because data science or these things are not a one-off activities. It has to create a flywheel affecting the organization, I would say a data-driven operating model, which means that we should be able to get the feedback from the customers, from the business. And let's say, for example, if we are looking at the sales and salespeople, that how they're adopting these analytics or data science model outputs or recommendations, and what they need to improve, how we are capturing that feedback into the data again and improving the quality of recommendations. So in my opinion, these are 3-4 things. If they are missing from any of these programs, organizations going to face some challenges in being successful in the data strategy domain there.
Awesome.
Yeah, so
Great
I would
insight.
like to add one thing, Gautam, to that
Sure.
list, because one other reason for failure is not looking at deep security, not only authorization and authentication. When it comes to data, we have to look at the entitlement as well. Not everyone can read every piece of data. And I think this will support convincing the business stakeholders as well. I would like to add as another point for the final question that you asked.
No, that's great. And I am going to bite my tongue and not talk more about that, because that is a passion of mine. As you know, I'm all into data ops and data enablement and data empowerment, and try to make sure that the right people have the right amount of data. But I want to limit this conversation to building a great data strategy. So let's wrap up. There's been some amazing insights from you both, right? First thing, organizations need to have a good data strategy to successfully achieve their business outcomes. This data strategy should be specific, practical, comprehensive, and ever evolving. I hope I got that right, Sunil. And must drive towards enhancing the overall experience of the customer.
Correct.
We also want our data strategy to be ambidextrous, as Sunil puts it, both offensive and defensive for success. And most importantly, your data strategy should be strongly aligned with your business strategy. We need to construct an outcomes roadmap and take time to identify the measures that matter and apply those data-driven decision making to ensure that we will achieve our business outcomes. Obviously, with the right amount of security, with the right amount of data empowerment that we're giving them, and also we need to have a data-driven operating model to be successful. Thank you for another episode of Spirited Dialogue. This has been a lively conversation, and there were some great insights from both of you. Tune in next episode, where we will explore some common misconceptions around data strategies and dive into creating a data-driven culture. As always, please send your comments and feedback and topics that you would like us to cover in this data strategy series by reaching out to us on LinkedIn and Twitter, or by using the contact form on our blog. Until next time, from all of us at Transformity, cheers.
Cheers.